Miles in the chat about wanting a new dirt bike. Reminds me of a young man I once knew named William Mitchell, who, when he graduated from my uh, G school class some 10 years ago or something, before Turing existed, long before he was director of the front end engineering program, he graduated, he got a fancy job, and he went out and bought a Subaru with street glow. And I was like, wow, is there anything more that like a 25-year-old young man wants than a car with street glow at that time in the early 20 teens? So that could be you. Put some street glow on the dirt bike. Okay. Next generation. Welcome everybody. Thanks for signing up. Thanks for coming. I think it's probably pretty transparent to you. I want to shift the narrative around jobs, share with you like information, data, things we're seeing, tips. None of the things I'm going to say today are things that have never been said before or no one else thinks. This is not totally unique things that only I know or anything. But hopefully by packaging it up for you today, can get you ready to like actually do them, leverage them. Maybe some things you're already doing and you're adding on, or you're starting from scratch. I think it's all okay. Getting a first technical role. Oh, let me say first the agenda. We're going to do kind of two parts. First part is going to be me talking, and you, if my recommendation would be taking notes. I prefer to take notes on paper. I think it's significantly better for your brain than taking notes on a computer, but I leave that up to you. I think that'll be about 35 minutes. And then I want to spend about 15, 20 minutes doing some case studies where I solicited some volunteers / victims and are going to run through a little bit of the beginning of the process with, I'm hoping like 2, 3 of them. We'll see how timing goes. This is, I would consider a prototype, a first draft. So I welcome your feedback, especially afterwards. I probably can't process your feedback while I'm in the middle of talking, but would love your thoughts afterwards if there are things you found particularly interesting or particularly confusing, or when I said it one way one time and a different way a different time, and you wish it was the same way both times. All that stuff would be really great. Would hope to iterate and improve this for next time in a couple weeks. So we're going to do this, 2/3 talk, you're taking notes, 1/3 put it into some practice. I am recording. I'll share the recording with you afterwards. Then we'll wrap it up, and we'll be sure to be done. I'm shooting for 12:55, so you have time to transition to class or to work or whatever it is you're doing. All right, so background. Getting a first technical role is hard. It's always been hard, but maybe right now it's like a little bit tougher than normal. Also, things are warming up. There have been 8 jobs accepted in the last 10 days. We're getting close towards this goal that I've been shooting for of a job a day. And I thank you for coming here and putting the work in to yourself and into our community to help like make that a reality. I know job hunting can be scary and lonely. I think showing up to these spaces is valuable for the knowledge and skill development that you take away, but also just to remember that you're not alone. There are other people working through the same challenges as you. There are folks trying to find their way. Quickly scanning through attendees and registrants, I can tell you there are current students, there are recent grads, there are folks who graduated a while ago, been grinding on that job hunt. There are some distant alums who have at least 2 jobs under their belt and are still here, right? So it's like all these folks are all pushing the same direction as you. And that's not, as I continue to like bang the drum, it doesn't mean like, oh God, you got to beat the 70 other people who are on this session. It's like all these people are a part of the wave, the tide that is like getting you to the place that you want to be. So thanks for showing up and thanks for participating today. Let's get into it. How do you find a job that doesn't exist? I think it's important to think about where jobs come from, especially junior level jobs, entry level jobs. It's not the case that there's too much work on a team, and if we just had one noob show up in here, then like everything will be okay. They could do the jobs we don't want to do, and then the rest of us would be like sailing and just crushing amazing code. Or it's also not the case that teams are like, oh, we want to start this new project. If only someone could come in here and be like, Rails new project, then we'd be golden and they could build something in 2 weeks, right? These are not the reasons that junior developers get hired. Hiring junior roles is about capacity building for the near future. Hopefully not the distant future, but the near future. What that means is that a team is really hiring you for the developer you're going to become more than they're hiring you for the developer you are today. That's part of why this whole, like, when you hear alums talk about their Turing experience, and if you are an alum, like hopefully it resonates with you, is like Turing is built around learning how to ramp up on skills quickly, how to apply principles in multiple contexts, etc. It's not that you're like fully baked and now we'll shop you around to say like, who wants this finished product? What you've really done is built this confidence, skills, capability, understanding around like, how do I get good at things in a short period of time? And it should be obvious to you and to hiring companies and everybody involved that like 5 years from now, you're probably not going to be using the same technologies that you are today. At least it's not the same libraries, or versions are going to change and strategies and, models are going to change and all that. So if it's just the case that you're like expert at this fixed set of things and you can then go apply that in your developer job, that's going to be a deteriorating value. 3 years from now, it's going to be less valuable than it is now. The real value of a software developer is how they can adapt and grow and change over time. And that's core to the argument that you're making to the hiring company, is like, look at me. A few months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, I was doing this totally unrelated thing. And now, look at me now. Imagine where I'm going to be in 2 years. The great hope for a junior developer in the first 6 months or year is that they can honestly just break even. They get some things done, they commit some code, they learn how the team works, they build some relationships and get some guidance without being like a net negative to the team's productivity. That's why junior jobs have been slow over the last year. It's not AI, it's not because tech is ending, it's none of these like doomsday things. Companies have been focused on how they're going to navigate the next 6 months, not building towards the team they want to have a year or two from now. But that vision, I think about it like a runner, which I am not. But, they say like when you're struggling and you're running, you're looking at your feet. And when you're thriving, you're looking at the horizon. Like that vision for companies has been at their feet for the last year, just to make sure they can cover the next payroll and deal with the next thing in front of them. And that vision is starting to rise to the road ahead. I think the second half of this year will continue to show much stronger job numbers if we're doing the things we've been doing, plus doing the things where we're all kind of trying to turn it up a notch here. So people hire junior developers for the developer they're going to become, not for the developer they are today. They hire them for their future self, both the developer's future self and the company's future self. They're projecting out, what do we think we're going to need 6 months from now, 12 months from now? It's not because you're going to solve problems today. So what's the strategy here? To get a job means convincing a hiring company that you are worth the risk. Hiring people is a risk. Firing people is bad. The whole time up until you fire someone is a negative on culture, negative money, negative productivity, everything. Like when you hire someone, it's not just like, well, let's see what happens. When you hire someone, because you got to be damn sure it's going to work. Now, you might be wrong. People don't work out for sure. But so it's not like software developers are not like software itself. You can't just like try shit and see what happens, right? Move fast and break things, as Facebook used to say. Sometimes gets adapted to like move fast and break people. Like people don't work that way. You can't just bring people in and try it out and see what happens. It's gotta be as close as possible to a sure thing when they get hired. You have to convince them of who you're going to become in 6 months and how little of a burden you're going to be during that time. Your code, your portfolio, your resume are nice words on the screen. they're probably not that compelling. They are required and they're important. And I don't want to undermine them in the sense of like, sometimes people are like, oh, I heard companies don't even read cover letters. I heard this doesn't even matter. I heard that's generally like bullshit, trying to let yourself off the hook of like, I don't really want to deal with these things. And so I heard one person say that they're not important. They are important. Your resume, your LinkedIn, et cetera, they can't get you a job, but they can lose you a job. They will, like, I always think about the documentary Office Space, where he has this huge stack of resumes and he goes, first is I don't hire unlucky people, and he grabs the top half and throws them straight in the trash can. And that's not so different than how the real world is. And so if your LinkedIn isn't strong, if your resume isn't strong, if a company's looking for a cover letter and you don't have one, you're going to be in the half that goes straight in the trash can. Those things are required. They're not going to win you the job. They're also not really what we're going to talk about today. But I just want to be clear that like all this isn't a replacement for doing the required parts. Your goal in a job hunt is to become a person, not a PDF. To do so, you have to treat the people you interact with like people, not robots. You then have to make the case proving that you are a real person, you're an interesting person, you're a caring person, and you are worth taking a risk on. The worst way to become a person in the eyes of a hiring manager is by pumping out generic application after application. I'm a person, I have a pulse, I have a portfolio and a resume, I would like a job, I heard you have one, give it to me. When you're in a pool of 500 applicants, you are exceptionally unlikely to get the job. You might actually be the best candidate out of that whole pool. You might be the most skilled, and still, selection processes aren't that great. Interview processes aren't that great. You can be the best candidate and not get the job. Being in a pool of 500 over and over and over and over does not increase your odds of success every single time you are 1 out of 500. And so just like spinning that roulette wheel over and over is not a strategy. You want to be in a pool of 1 or a pool of 5 or maybe 10. That's where you're likely to shine, where the people reviewing your materials have the time and attention to understand and give a shit who you are, where the interviewer has time to prep and think about you as a specific candidate, not just you as a generic candidate. It's where the real you is going to show up and where you're going to find a job. You work to find these jobs that don't exist so that you can be in an incredibly small pool and already be several steps down the road to showing them who you really are. Why do developers get hired in the first place? When you run a business, some money you spend is necessary, essential, cover your ass money. You spend money on health insurance, compliance, accounting. You have to do it, but that's dead money. Then there's money that makes money. When you spend money on sales, if the team and the individuals know what they're doing, then they bring in more money than they cost. You spend $1 on sales, maybe you bring in $2 or $3 in revenue. These are sometimes referred to as like profit centers. They're the parts of the business where doing more of them makes more profit and grows the business. You can't do accounting your way into market domination, but you can sell your way there. Software developers build products that get sold. Software development is really part of the sales pipeline. Software developers are in sales, even if they don't want to admit it. In the simplest understanding, more software developers means more product, means more to sell. And if the sales effort is working, then you get more money. And companies like money. When money is tight, where is it going to get spent? When investment potential is limited, as it has been in the last year, investors got spooked. They stopped investing in things. They put their money into safer bets because the return on things like federal bonds and so forth has been so high that it's better to like take that known 7% or whatever than roll the dice on a startup that might double your money or might go out of business. When investment potential is limited, you have to spend it in the spots where you have the greatest return on investment, the greatest ROI, with the hope that that generates enough revenue to then cover all those need to do roles. The accounting and all others. No offense, accountants. No company really wants to have accountants, right? It's like you have it because you have to. There are lots of jobs, lots of expenses that get done only because they have to be done. So when you have just a bit of money as either a software company or a company that is, kind of software driven, then you're going to hire for sales and engineering first, because those are the most obvious places where the dollar you spend comes back in multiples. If a company has money to spend, then they're going to spend it there first, or at least be open to and interested in spending it there first, which means if a software company is hiring, then they're hiring developers. A company is either hiring or they're dying. These are the only two possibilities. So if you will, like fundamental principle underlying here, they're hiring or they're not. If they're willing to hire anybody, any role across the company, HR, QA, project management, any kind of role, then you should assume that they are also interested in hiring people who help them make money, and that's you as software developers. Okay, so companies hiring or they're not. It doesn't matter if they say they're hiring the specific role, the specific team, et cetera, that you think you'd be the best fit in. How do we find them? How do we capture it? How do we make the connections? How do we get that job? Step one is about you. You got to find your advantages. You did not come to Turing as a newborn baby. You lived, you've gone to schools, you probably had a few jobs, maybe even a career or two. Those are all advantages in your pocket, and this is the time that you need to capitalize them, even if you don't love them or even like them. The massive challenge in front of you is getting a first technical job. The second technical job is much easier. The third technical job is even easier. The fourth technical job is even easier. This is the time where you are climbing the steepest mountain. If you're a veteran, you need to mention that every step of the way. Everyone needs to know. And you know what veterans hate doing, in my experience, coaching Turing, talking about being a veteran. Too bad. Write it on your forehead, whatever you got to do. Like, people need to know. If you worked in insurance, then every insurance related company you apply to needs to hear about it. If you worked in a restaurant, then you're talking about how customer service and dealing with a flurry of requirements is what you do best under pressure. You left some place to come to Turing. You probably left it because you were sick of it. Maybe even you resent it. And yet you need to capitalize on it anyway. You invested a chunk of your life into building that understanding, that network, that credibility. And this is the time that you kind of need to like wring the last drops of value out of it to get you onto your next step. And then if you want to leave it behind, you can probably do that. So to be really concrete about it, finding your advantages, the place you live can be an advantage. I won't say every place is an advantage, but most of them are an advantage to some company, to some space. The schooling you've done can be an advantage. The places you've worked and jobs you've done can be an advantage. Your identity and your demographics can be an advantage. Groups you can participate or opt into can be an advantage. You need as an individual to figure out what these are, chart them out, and then figure out how to exploit and maximize them, because they are going to help you stand out, get into that small pool rather than being in the 500-person pool. Step 2, finding the targets. If you mapped those advantages like a Venn diagram or some kind of, I like to think in like graphical organizers, what industries, companies, or niches would be in the intersections? I think the goal in this brainstorming phase is to find something like 30 to 40 companies for initial research. And really, in the sense of brainstorming, where it's like all ideas are good ideas, like you're just trying to generate a big list. You're not trying to validate or think about like, is this a place I would actually want to work? Are these good people? Do I know anyone there? That's later stuff. Okay. Finding the targets means just like brainstorming, brain dumping, and doing some research. Job boards might have some good ideas for you, but everyone's looking there. At least if you are going to do some job board driven research, look for less obvious jobs. like look for those project management jobs and the sales jobs and so forth that aren't the job you want, but they show you who's hiring in this niche, whether it's like a domain or it's a region or what have you. And then I think a really powerful way to find companies is to ask yourself, if you were the company and you wanted to be known, being known is advantageous as a company because it helps you hire, it helps you retain good talent because like you have a degree of prestige, and it helps with like sales and customer development, all those kinds of things. So as a company, there is no advantage, typically speaking, to being hidden. You almost always want to be known in your community, in your industry, et cetera. If you were a company who wanted to be known and established in a particular industry or geographic area, what would you do? One of the most obvious things is you'd participate in community spaces. Post-COVID, there are a lot of community spaces that are growing, thriving, really coming back strong. I'm seeing, for instance, regional tech conferences come back. In the Ruby land, regional tech conferences didn't die out because of COVID. They died out in like 2017 because like no one wanted them anymore. But now people working from home are saying like, hey, it'd be kind of cool to get together with some people in person that are doing things I'm interested in. And those conferences are coming back. Are there any regional regional conferences in your area or area that you're interested in? Professional organizations are running more regional and national conferences. Who's speaking at those and what companies do they work for? Which companies are sponsoring? Who posted about it on LinkedIn or Twitter? And where do those people work? You might start digging through LinkedIn and finding some of the people who work at that company. They don't even have to be relevant to you. But if you find some software developers, don't start just like networking and sending messages yet. That's going to be much later. We're just trying to find the target companies, but people who are software developers at companies you're interested in, you should look and research, where did they previously work? Was it in the same niche, industry, or geographic location? Does that company still exist? What people does that one lead you to? Or maybe you look and you find that events haven't really ramped up, or there are only a few sponsors. Can you look back and find previous years? What about pre-COVID? Can you find the old website, the old list of speakers, sponsors, sessions? Can you find the old hashtag and dig up ancient tweets or LinkedIn posts? You can also look, in places like chambers of commerce in a given town or county or state, organizing bodies that get together companies. Many times they have lists. Sometimes they'll even tell you. You can reach out to them and say like, hey, I'm looking for software companies in Nashville, and talk to the Nashville Chamber of Commerce. And they might be willing to be like, here's a list, 200 people, 200 companies that are members of ours who say that they're software companies. Now you got to filter through and figure out what really has potential. When you do that deep digging, especially if you dig into like the historical record, whoever was in the spotlight in 2017 and 2019 and 2021 is probably still in that industry today. Especially when you talk about individuals that show up there, maybe today they don't have as much time for community engagement, or they moved, or their priorities changed. Those are actually great contact points because they probably don't get as much direct outreach anymore. And you all of a sudden show up in their inbox and they're just a little more likely to be interested in talking with you. This kind of digging is an investigative work that it takes to find these like 30 to 40 companies who are worth really researching. Step 3, evaluating the potential. So evaluating and narrowing down your field. Some of them will be quick rejects. Some will be out of business now or clearly headed that way. The first question I would try and answer about each of them is, are they hiring at all? If no, then they're probably going to go to like Icebox, like a back burner. Icebox and back burner kind of mean the same thing, totally different thermal implications. If they are hiring, then what kinds of roles are they hiring for? If they're hiring for technical roles, what can I learn about the tech stack based on those listings? If the tech stack is aligned or nearly aligned to things I know, then they're definitely a priority for further investigation. If the tech stack is things that are interesting, sound kind of interesting, or I could learn, then they're going to be in like a middle tier. Categorizing opportunities like this might be tricky because you don't know a whole lot about other languages and frameworks and so forth. It's a great thing to do with the support of a peer, like even just another fellow job hunter here, a mentor or a friend who has like a little more familiarity with the industry. For instance, like you might not know that if you're a Ruby or JavaScript developer, that learning Python is like trivially easy, where learning Elixir is like significantly harder. Not impossible, but a Python listing is like much nearer field than an Elixir listing. As you evaluate them, like consider diving into the company's history. Have they announced any funding or growth initiatives in the last year? What about previous years? Are there any indications that they're maybe about to grow? Like, do they have more job listings than it appears like they had 3 months ago? Then clearly they're in a growth phase. Can you find any old job descriptions for jobs that aren't currently open? Were there job descriptions that they had posted 2 years ago, a year ago, 5 years ago? What can you learn from there? Can you even figure out maybe who got that job? If you start triangulating some of this data, you know, I picture the like cork board of like the photos and the yarn and all that stuff. Can you start to correlate some of the underlying factors and influences? Can you correlate fundraising to hiring? Can you start to understand like how this specific company thinks about and prioritizes growth? What you're really trying to work towards here is a top priority set of about 8 companies that you're going to aggressively pursue, and about 12 that you're going to put some effort into and see if they germinate into being worth more. And just to reiterate, in this step 3, you're not finding companies that you think could be hiring now, or excuse me, you're finding companies that you think could be hiring now or might hire in the future. You're not just looking for companies that are hiring at this moment, hiring junior software developers at this moment. We are really, throughout this whole process, never looking or never using junior software roles as a criteria. If they show up, then that's just information in the process. Step 4, understanding the target. So starting to focus on like this high priority set of 8. The next thing to figure out is, what is their voice? Who do they try to be? How do they try to portray themselves? What images and words do they use? Are they going out and doing volunteer work? Are they showing up for industry panels? Do they write and publish blog posts? Contribute to open source code? Do they contribute to some other kinds of like technical projects? Do they hype up the stories of their clients? Like, what can you learn about their messaging? And specifically, could you learn to speak in their voice? When you show up on their radar in step 6, you want to seem less risky than other candidates. And part of how you do that is to show or pretend to already be one of them. They're interested in X, now you're interested in X. They're trying to do Y, you're also trying to do Y. You can stretch the truth a little bit, be slightly creative. It's also okay to just be curious. I will tell you, I have read hundreds of job applications to Turing over the years, and it is clear that the vast majority of them don't know jack shit about Turing, put no effort into this application, and they're like, I'm a person, I would like a job. I heard you have one, give it to me. You want to be able to demonstrate that you understand the like who, what, when, where, why of their business. You want to build yourself a document where you're pulling together quotes, notes, mission statements, advertising phrases, like a dossier of who this company is and who they want to be, at least who they want everyone to think they are. This is like your greatest tool in getting on their radar. Step 5, finding your contact points. Job hunting, you know, is something that people tend to get worse at over time. And beyond like 60, 90 days, Turing grads it's easy, understandable how you can like lose enthusiasm. You start to develop pattern matching where it says like, oh, this one is just like the other one. The other one didn't work out. This one won't work out either. In these difficult stages, job hunters tend to give up too easy. They say things like, I talked with somebody who works at that company and they said they aren't hiring junior developers anytime soon. End of the story. Even when that's true, that person that they talk to doesn't know everything. They don't know every team. They don't know what's coming in the next board meeting or quarterly planning session. They're really just one person who has a pretty limited perspective on what's happening at the company right now and what's going to happen in the near future. For any company on your high priority list, I think you need at least 3 and probably more like 5 no's before you put them on the back burner. If someone really doesn't want to talk to you, they will say, stop emailing me. When you email someone and you send them a follow-up 2 weeks later or a week later, you're not harassing them. You are doing the steps that it takes to like perform outreach and get on the radar. If someone doesn't want to hear from you, let them tell you that. Don't just imagine that, oh, they didn't reply to my email. They know I'm an idiot. They never want to hear from me again. Keep pushing until you get no's. You're going to keep pushing until you get no's. You need to do what you can to understand their organizational structure. Maybe a company's small enough that people are just on their website, or you can sift through LinkedIn. If you go the LinkedIn route, don't totally skip over people who used to work there. That'll show up in your search results. They could be valuable ins if you find some connection or excuse to talk to them. But I'd say more immediately for the step 5, you need to figure out who works there and who can help you. The 3 to 5 people that you talk to, that you push on until you get those no's, really should be in a diversity of roles, both in like width and height, responsibility and domain. I think it would be wise to try and find like 2 people in each of these buckets. First, individual contributor engineers, like people who are writing code, they write code all day, that's what they do. They have titles like software developer, senior engineer, et cetera. Second, engineering team leads, people who are responsible for either managing a small team of engineers or managing a team and doing some software on their own. 3, engineering managers, folks who are probably a step up from team leads, who are responsible for multiple team leads, and their whole time is spent doing management. 4th, HR and or recruitment, people, I kind of put those in the same bucket. Folks whose job it is to hire and bring people into the company, to onboard people. 5th is public faces who are not C-level. Okay, this is one that's a little tricky to understand. Who are the people who get sent to speak at events, who are publishing blog posts, who are contributing to those open source projects, who are posting the tweets? Don't bother with the senior leadership, as they're typically too difficult to get a hold of. But anyone else in the org who steps out to be like, hey, I represent this company, aren't we so cool? Things like developer relations and so forth fit under this umbrella. These are people that are great to reach out to, because clearly part of their job, or at least the responsibility they've taken on, is being an interface from the company to the outside. You're outside, you want to interface with the company, you want to talk to that person. And then 6th, I got the grab bag. Like anyone else who you find some plausible in with. They went to your college, they grew up in your town, you share some identity markers, you have some friend that you used to know in high school that's connected to them in LinkedIn or whatever. Finding 2 or 3 of those like is nice if they pop up along the way, but really the first 5 are the key. Altogether, these are the people that you're going to dig into and try and convince them that you are a real person. Step 6. Something that drives me crazy in this, okay, I shouldn't say drive me crazy. Something that pisses me off when people are talking about their job hunt is when we talk about cold outreach. And I think maybe we're using the wrong words to talk about cold outreach, or we need to look at how we're teaching it or coaching it or whatever, because most of what people are doing is not cold outreach. Most often what I hear is somebody's asked about doing cold outreach. They're like, oh yeah, I reached out to these 6 different Turing alums that none of them said they had jobs. And the reason I get pissed off is that is not cold outreach. That is like asking your cousin on a date. And that's not the way. Okay. You need cold outreach is cold, like to people who never heard of you. They never heard of Turing. They don't give a shit about you. That's what cold outreach looks like. And I'm thinking about, I haven't come to a strong opinion on this yet, but I'm thinking about kind of rebranding this to smart outreach, because just reaching out to Turing alums is not that bold. Like, you are not really using your brain a whole lot. That's just like the obvious thing to do. So I'm gonna call step 6 smart outreach. Please don't email these people that you find and say, hey, I'm a person, I'm looking for a job. Do you have one? And at the same time, let's not pretend that this is like some elaborate dating game where you're gonna like trick them over the course of 4 weeks. And then all of a sudden you're gonna be like, how about a job? And they're like, oh, I never saw this coming. Oh my God, yeah, have a job. Okay. For each of the people you found, you need to put in a degree of effort. If they publish things, what does it say? What are they interested in? What spaces do they show up for? How does that overlap potentially with you, your background, your experience, your interests? Then once you have that, it's time to start the outreach effort. The first step of good outreach is not telling them about you. It's so annoying to me. And I know some people maybe like say this is a good practice. I'll tell you, for me, it's an annoying practice. I hate when I read a cover letter, and the cover letter, all it tells me is how perfect they are for this job. And I'm like, you don't know. You don't work here. I decide who's perfect for this job. Okay. Don't tell me you're perfect. You're uniquely qualified, blah, blah, blah. I'll decide that stuff. Good outreach doesn't start by telling them about you. You need to tell them about them. If you've ever, read a book like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, or you just participate in social spaces and like try making friends and so forth, the easiest way to have people like you is to ask them questions about themselves and make the whole conversation about them. Because when people walk away from that conversation, they're like, wow, Andrew was so great. And if you were like, what did you learn about Andrew? They'd be like, I don't even know. I talked about myself the whole time. People talking about themselves, they love it. And when they're looking at your face, talking about themselves, they're like, I love this person because I get to talk about myself. In email form, when you kick off showing that you know who they are and you give half a shit about them and what their deal is, they're like, oh, you like me? You read my blog post? You looked at my open source code? You read my LinkedIn for more than 5 seconds before sending this thing? You got to prove that you put your time and effort and attention into them before you ask for theirs. Use email when you can, much before LinkedIn messaging, but I will admit that LinkedIn messaging has become more popular in the last couple of years. If I'm writing an email and I found Linda is like some, full-time engineer on the team, I'm writing an email that's like, hey, Linda, I'm job hunting and have been learning about X company. I'm admitting at the front that like, yes, I'm job hunting. This is not just like I'm making friends out here on the internet. Okay. I'm job hunting and I've been learning about X company. I read your blog post titled Why and the way you've rebuilt the messaging architecture for the app using Z technology. I'm trying to set myself up as a standout candidate for X company and have started building a project with Z. I was wondering what learning resources you found helpful when you were getting started with it. Do you think it'll be used for more projects in the future? Do you see candidates right now showing up with Z on their resume already? And is there any chance I could send you my Z project for some quick thoughts or feedback? Linda is replying to that email. Linda's going to be like, oh, you looked at my stuff? You're interested in the niche weird thing I'm interested in? Oh yeah, here's like 3 links and da-da-da-da, send me your project. And now you have like a conversation. Now you start to look like a real person versus putting that bullet on your resume and sending it in and being like, I hope someone like Linda notices that bullet on my resume. It's not happening. They're not noticing it. In venture capital, there's this phrase that I hate most everything about venture capital. There's this like one phrase that I like from their world, which they say, ask for money, you get advice. Ask for advice, you get money. I think how that applies here is like, you ask for jobs, you probably get jack shit. You ask for advice, you might get jobs. People love giving advice. But the question, do you have any advice for me, is way too general. I cringe, like it hurts my heart a little bit. You see this pop up in Slack sometimes, people pop into the alumni channel and they'll be like, hey, here's my resume. Anybody have any thoughts? It doesn't inspire an answer. It's well-intended and it's unfortunately like kind of lazy. The programming analogy is they say, you know, if you write 300 lines of code and put it in a pull request, the feedback you're going to get is looks good. But if you put in a pull request of 8 lines of code, you'll get 16 comments on it, right? People want to give comments, feedback, insight to focus things, not to broad things. When instead you show that you put the work in, you learn some things about the company, about the individual, about the efforts, etc. You gathered information and now you're leveraging that to ask specific questions, requesting specific advice. That's what a real person sounds like. Not like a fucking AI or like the top 10 questions you should ask in a random cold outreach email. Now you look like somebody who seems worth my time. And I'll tell you, there's me and then there's 71 of you. Nobody does all this. Statistically speaking, I will promise you, you will not do this. It takes consistency across multiple contact points, it takes multiple steps of research across multiple companies. I'm excited to share this plan with you today. I hope you will take the challenge to prove me wrong. If you do, you're going to find the jobs that don't exist. And the job listing will never go up because you already won it. That's it. That's the 6 steps to find a job that doesn't exist. All right. Now, transition. We're going to try something different. I don't know how this is going to work. Let's see. I'm going to hit this participants and Lauren. All right, Lauren, it's your time. It's your time to shine here.
I'm ready. I've been preparing for this all day.
Yes, great. I hope I don't blow it. I'm going to try and give Lauren a few thoughts here. I got Lauren's LinkedIn. I'm going to try not to spoil too much of my like later session of here's what my LinkedIn makes me think about you. But I'm going to give you a couple thoughts on if I was Lauren, how I'm thinking about these things, right? So really, I'm just focused on step 1 and 2, like what are Lauren's advantages and what are the targets? Okay, so if I don't know a whole lot about Lauren, okay, I skimmed this briefly like 10 minutes ago. First off, I saw this background here and I was like, oh, Lauren's into like germs or something. I don't know what this thing is about, but okay. Software engineer, Ruby, Rails, GitHub, Turophile. I Googled that. It's a person who's into cheese and mental health. All right. Okay. You got me interested now. Reminds me of an alum named Mimi Schatz, who was a therapist, psychologist, something along those lines, and is amazing. And I would be like, first thing to do, find Mimi, reach out to her, she'll help you. Okay. So this angle of like, I'm a psychologist first and a software engineer second, my advantage is I understand people like other people don't. And software engineers, the vast majority of software engineers have been software engineers their entire career. They don't understand shit about people. And then when they build software that people don't like, they're like, people are so dumb. Why don't they do the smart things like how I think they should think? And instead, Lauren is going to make the argument and look for opportunities where it's like people-centric software development. Okay, so I don't know about, and this is like a genuine don't know. Also, it seems like my video is lagging. I don't know what's up with that, but I don't know about listing Turing in experience versus education. I'm gonna assume Tracy or somebody like knows more about that. Okay, Department of Veteran Affairs. Now, Lauren, are you a veteran? You just worked at the VA.
Yeah, I'm a military brat, but I did not serve myself. Just worked
Okay,
there.
you don't have to say, you don't have to undercut it. You put 11 years into like serving people who really needed it, and people need to hear about that. Like that needs to show up in outreach and the research and so forth. So, um, you know, places, things like medical tech spaces are very interested in someone who actually knows what service delivery looks like. Right? You got Virginia Tech. I got a Virginia Tech alumni in the house right now. She's laughing over there. Virginia Tech is useful, and you'll find people in the industry who went to Virginia Tech. Okay, so, and you're based in Denver. Okay, I've heard of it. They're like the mental health, telehealth, etc., is really interesting. I think Denver has like health is a pretty solid like health industry town. Obviously there's like DaVita is one of the biggest companies. There's a company called iTriage that was one of Denver's first big startups. And I don't remember, I think iTriage got bought by Aetna. Aetna has a pretty big footprint in Colorado. And these are some of the places that I'm like starting the digging, not just of like Aetna and DaVita, but it's like who used to work at iTriage, who works at Aetna now, and where did they work before? And these kinds of spaces where it's like people who care about similar things that you care about, where are they working now? Where did they work before? That's how I'm starting to build my list. Denver regionally doesn't provide a tremendous advantage. Like, obviously, we have a lot of grads in Denver and Colorado, so it's not like you're going to reach out to someone and they're like, wow, I was just wishing I could find a junior developer willing to live in Denver, Colorado, because there are a lot of them. So that being said, I would say that health related companies tend to be run by health, like corporate professionals, people that were working in hospitals and big health companies and so forth. They're coming into it with like a traditional mindset. They're probably going to be companies that are working in person, that are either currently in person or are moving back to fully in person. And so I think if you're willing to be in person in the Denver area or greater Denver area, then that's like a slight advantage for you that you can capitalize on in the market. I'm then looking for meetups, like are there health tech meetups that have happened in Denver, in the Springs, in Fort Collins, now or in the past? Like who ran those things, who spoke at them, who talked about them on Twitter or LinkedIn. And I'm really gonna focus on, probably because there are enough health tech companies in Colorado, I'm probably gonna like focus on that bubble until I like prove it doesn't work. I think that's where you have the most advantage. What do you think, Lauren? Plausible? Already what you were doing? Different? Tell me.
I think that
Thoughts.
sounds very plausible and very realistic. So I just started Mod 3, so I really haven't started my job search. But kind of in the back of my head, I had the idea that I'd probably be most competitive for health tech and med tech type of companies. And I mean, I'm pretty open to whatever I can get
Yeah,
for that first job. So if I have a slight advantage for health tech or med tech, then like sign me up.
totally.
It's interesting that you said that about health tech being more likely to be in person, and I hadn't thought about that before, but that does make a lot of sense. So that's a good thing for me to keep in mind.
There's also, I think coming back to kind of the like VA military involvement angle, the VA nationally has technical roles. They're mostly on site in DC, but worth like looking into it, seeing who works there, where did they used to work. And then there's also a friend of mine named Taylor McLemore. He most recently ran Techstars Denver, but before that, he used to run a program called Patriot Bootcamp. And it was an effort to help veterans start small businesses, primarily small technical businesses. And it would be cool to like dig into what companies were incubated or participated in Patriot Bootcamp 5-8 years ago. Where are they now? And can you like find any ins there? Because they'll be more interested in you, right? For your time in the VA. All right, Lauren, you're out.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Yep. All right, Rachel was the next to respond. Oh, I gotta put Rachel on the co-host so she can talk. Rachel's still here. She didn't bail out of, oh no, I've pushed the wrong button. Fucking Zoom. Okay, make co-host. Make co-host. All right, Rachel, you ready? Hi. Hey, Rachel's in the sunflowers. I like sunflowers. Okay, I'm here for it. Vancouver, Washington. Okay, I like it. Regionality. If you don't know, Vancouver, Washington, different, but not far from Vancouver, Canada. There is obviously like a enterprise dominated tech scene in Seattle, primarily driven through Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, etc. If you're willing, I think if you're going to exploit things locally, it is going to either be those mega companies or good potential in people that used to work at those companies, but now they're working somewhere that they like better. They got fed, they put their 10 years in at Amazon, they're fed up with it, and now they started a 50-person company and it's cool. Okay. So I think regionally there is space to exploit. There is also in, did you do back end or front end? Front end. Okay. There's a conference called Cascadia JS. We've spoken there and sponsored there and so forth. Cascadia JS is like JavaScript conference for the Cascadia region. Is that what you call it? And super nice people, small conference, good employers on the sponsor list, good speakers. Find where the individuals who go to that, where they work, what they talk about, what user groups they participate in. And even if you don't necessarily want an in-person job, Pacific Northwest, like pretty progressive, you're outside of the mega companies, I would expect almost every company to either be hybrid or remote. So just because you're looking regionally doesn't mean you're saying like, oh, I'm going to go to some office 5 days a week. I would definitely, you have in driving distance, Seattle, Bend, and Portland. And I would look at opportunities to go to physical meetup groups in each of those places. If you can afford the like time and gas and effort and so forth. There is just no, when you are in person, you are a real person. And so when you can take advantage of those spaces and meet a couple people and just be transparent about it, like, hey, I'm looking for a job. I came here because I heard this good thing and I saw this person was speaking and blah, 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 blah. And people are like, cool, let me introduce you to so-and-so. So I think that's a space I would definitely exploit, that regionality. And okay, so I don't really know exactly what loan officers do, but I know that the mortgage lending space has a ton of tech influence in it. Particularly, there are a lot of companies based out of Chicago that are like lending tech, and those are spaces I would poke around for companies you might investigate, especially not just like the super large ones, Quicken Loans and so forth, but other companies that are interested in making loans, like having someone who understands how loans work is really valuable when they're on your tech team. And then Blue Shield, so doing customer care. Okay, I think the customer care of the Blue Shield is more interesting than kind of the health insurance space. And so I would look at this experience from Blue Shield as trying to exploit your willingness and comfort to like work with people who are under stress. And so that's kind of the story I'm trying to tell people. Like if there are, say you're collaborating with Lauren and you're both applying to Sondermind that does like online therapy, and we have a couple of alums who have worked there. And Lauren's coming at it from the therapist angle, and you're coming at it from like the customer service angle. Like, I know how to work, how to build systems, and how to think about what people need when they need it most. And people were like, oh, that's interesting. Come talk to me about it. Oh my God, it's 12:57. Okay. Rachel, is that like a little bit helpful?
That's super helpful. Thank you. I didn't know most of that stuff about the Pacific Northwest. I'm actually not from here, so that's all like very helpful.
Yeah. And when you live in a place where people love living there, then they want to grow that community. They're tired of like cool, smart people moving to San Francisco. And so when you're like, hey, I'm here, I'm kind of new here, I'm not from here, but I want to be here and I want to do work here. They're like, be our friend, be our friend. We've been looking for friends, you know?
Cool. Thanks.
All right. We'll keep in touch. Sorry, Sergio, Antonio, and Daniel, that I'm not going to get to you in this one. Maybe we'll do like a follow-up session, or maybe I'll think about how we could do that if y'all think this stuff is interesting and valuable. I hope y'all picked up a couple things, particularly this like 6-step process to finding your job that doesn't exist. I'll make a space. I need to think about it, like where in Slack the conversation would best go. Maybe just in the Job Hunt channel, but yeah, I'll put it in Job Hunt. I would love to hear some reflections, like if there are things that stood out to you, or it's like, oh, I'm definitely not doing that, or I definitely am doing that, or I didn't think of that, or like, bro, I already heard that 50 times, so why'd you tell me again? All those kinds of things. If you make any progress on this, that would be great. And I think it is a space counterintuitively where you're better off collaborating than doing it alone. And so if you're able to find anybody who shares some of these identifiers that you're interested in exploiting, I think it's wise to collaborate. And it's okay if some people end up getting 3 emails from 3 different Turing students, and they're like, what the fuck is this Turing? Why do these people keep emailing me? Why are they all so smart and amazing? Can we hire all of them at the same time? It's probably better than just being one person trying to knock the door. All right. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Good luck in the job hunt. Thanks.